You're listening to the Retro Mo Podcast. I'm your host, Mo, and I love to play and review old video games and a few new games too. If you prefer to read instead of listen, check out my written reviews at retromo.substack.com. In this episode, I'll be sharing my experience with Final Fantasy VI for the SNES, released in 1994. I've scored this game 10 out of 10, a classic. Is this the best Final Fantasy game of all time? Quick note, Final Fantasy VI was first released as Final Fantasy III in the United States. Final Fantasy IV was originally released in the US as Final Fantasy II. It's all a big mess. While Final Fantasy VI is not my favorite in the series, because that honor belongs to Final Fantasy VII, I still must concede that Final Fantasy VI is truly the best game in the series. Ranking the Final Fantasy games is always highly subjective, and it's almost entirely dependent on nostalgia or console preference. Still, it's fun to debate and spell out your reasons for preferring certain entries in the series over another. Final Fantasy VI is just an impeccable game on all fronts. Fantastic RPG mechanics and gameplay, a very well-written story with a big cast of well-developed characters, great pixel art with a whimsical steampunk vibe, some of the best-looking tile sets on the SNES, and a phenomenal soundtrack from Nobuo Uematsu. In many ways, Final Fantasy VI has become the standard that many other RPGs are set against. For me, Final Fantasy VI is the peak of the classic Final Fantasy formula. The active time battle system has been basically perfected here. The character-specific abilities add a ton of variety, and the Esper magic system is one of my favorite magic systems from the whole series. My only complaint about the gameplay is that the encounter rate is just a bit too high. The engrossing story is really the highlight of this classic RPG. There's a huge cast of playable characters. I mean, not Chrono Cross huge, but still. And they are all well developed to the point that I have a sense of attachment to these characters. I care about their stories. Some games introduce too many characters with so little depth that you find yourself asking, why do I even care about this character? The way that Final Fantasy VI has you split your party into groups later in the game means that these characters are important in gameplay as well, not just story. Final Fantasy VI also has one of the greatest villains in the whole series, the erratic, unhinged, unpredictable villain. In the interest of keeping these reviews as spoiler-free as possible, I'll say no more. There's a crucial point about halfway through the game that brings a massive change in the tone of the story. This shift shocked me the first time I played this game, and it shocked me again when I recently played through Final Fantasy VI. These kinds of high-impact story beats are incredibly memorable. Nobuo Uematsu's soundtrack is utterly remarkable. Of course, there were many standout tracks from his earlier Final Fantasy scores, including classics like the title theme and the Chocobo theme, but there's something about the Final Fantasy VI score that signaled a shift. Many of these tracks capture the melancholic and moody sound that we've come to know and love from Uematsu. Some of my favorite tracks include The Mines of Narshe, Awakening, Phantom Forest, The Serpent Trench, Terra's theme, and so many more. You have to check out this soundtrack. Final Fantasy VI is a must-play for fans of the series and any RPG gamer wanting to experience some of the best that the SNES has to offer. Thanks for listening to the Retro Mo Podcast. As always, I do my best to keep all of my content spoiler-free and rated E for everyone. If you find this podcast enjoyable or helpful, tell a friend and consider giving a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app. If you have questions or comments, you can send an email to retromopodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Godspeed.